get in? There's somebody. Okay. Don't forget to close the door behind.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Say 1, 2, 3. Are you ready? Are you ready? Go 1, 2, 3. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Martin Wong was an extraordinary figure and artist. He was queer, Asian American. We might see his work in the same kind of constellation as Keith Haring or Jean-Michel Basquiat, art that was often both for and about public space, the street.
I think I bought this sometime around 1978 at the Canal Street Flea Market. It's a toy railroad station. This is the beginning of my obsession with miniature bricks.
Wong's works are these densely built paintings. They're paintings that almost take on a kind of sculptural edifice. They're evocative of this teeming life around him in downtown 80s New York. This new work, Houston Street, that has just come into the collection is monumental. It is this kind of obdurate barrier of this corrugated metal wall. But actually, on the flip side of the canvas is an incredible discovery, which is another painting.
When it finally arrived to the studio, we wanted to do examination, analysis, and whole comprehensive treatment. There were a lot of things that we were looking at. The losses that were located on various parts of the painting. There were a lot of materials that were stuck to the surface that we had to remove and make sure that they weren't part of the artist's process, but rather just causes of being stored in unfavorable conditions. So the treatment includes various parts, including restretching it, building a new stretcher to adequately support the piece. We knew that it was a double-sided painting, but we didn't know exactly what was on the other side. We talked to the previous owner and he told us his theories, but what we've been finding out since then has been an interesting story. Initially, we first thought it was a tagged painting. That was one of our first theories. And then the more we looked at it, we saw that there's a signature in the bottom, Martin Wong, and graffiti by Sharp and Delta 2.
Incredible. You know, when you see a work of art that you did decades ago and you haven't seen it and you don't remember it, it's like bumping into an old friend after many years. You know, you pick up where you left off, right? Like, art is a reflection of the soul. So this painting represents a part of, you know, me. It's a real privilege. I painted that painting when I was a teenager. I was so overwhelmed by looking at it, I couldn't really process the emotion. We started writing on trains like 1979, 1980. It's environmental, you know? It was around, so we were inspired by it.
A little bass load.
And by 1983, within the underground subterranean world, you know, we had some notoriety because we had painted a lot of trains.
Why do you have your mask on?
Because graffiti is not accepted by the whole of society, only basically by Soho and a few other people. But basically, graffiti writers are, you know, we are outlaws, and I can go to jail. And if my face is exposed, the wrong person might be looking at this TV program.
So you're a vandal. So graffiti's
No,
still...
I'm not a vandal.
You're a
I
criminal.
am an artist.
1983 was the year that I started painting on canvas.
What is that?
It's a painting.
And from 1983 to 1985 was the period where we were still actively involved in the subterranean world and actively involved in making art on canvas.
I'm looking for the graffiti artist. We are all graffiti artists.
There were a number of fuses that were all lit in the summer of 1980. The Fun Gallery was the first gallery in the East Village to show graffiti artists. Martin was showing his work, but he was entering at the very top. At his first opening, he sold a painting to the Metropolitan, which was a painting that nearly broke my heart when I saw it. He was aiming to make an artwork that was rough. It had certain aspects of the street, but it was undeniably beautifully painted, and it referred to graffiti artists.
Martin Wong became intertwined as a result of being an employee at Pearl Paint. It was like 6 degrees of separation. You know, everybody sort of knew each other, and, you know, we would go to the same openings and congregate at people's houses and go to parties. So then, you know, it just sort of happened. Martin loved being in the thick of it. You know, Martin lived in the Lower East Side. He became an integral part of that community. And he loved his position in the pecking order of being like, you know, a guy from around the way. They used to call him Chino Malo. And all the money that he made from the sale of his art essentially went to buying work from other artists. Martin was the first person to organize a museum show. He was always of the opinion that the culture didn't get enough respect in the mainstream, so he created the museum himself. It was a vehicle for him to showcase his collection, but it was also, you know, something that he did because he was giving back to the movement.
Martin Wong wrote this. He said, "The Museum of American Graffiti is a privately funded institution devoted to the study of aerosol hieroglyphics. It is hoped in the future that additional grants will enable us to publish and document information crucial to the field before luck and the vagaries of time will have dispersed this material forever." Wow.
This particular painting had 2 other panels that aren't here, that were portraits of the 2 of us. And then when it was exhibited, the portraits were turned like that to create it.
Like a triptych. Where do you think the paintings are now?
Martin didn't have a storage unit. I didn't have a storage unit. There was a little resources, you know, sometimes having enough money to eat was a challenge. I also don't really think that any of us really thought about our work in the context of the long game. Everything was about immediacy. When Martin started having a little bit more success in later years, I mentioned to him once that, you know, that he had enough money that he could move out of the Lower East Side and move to a better neighborhood. And he looked at me like I was insane, you know. And he said, "Oh, are you crazy? I'm never gonna leave this apartment. You know how much it costs?" It was less about the cost. It was just about like, that was his place. That was his inspiration.
The apartment used to look really nice, you know, it was like Architectural Digest, but I had to take the whole living room apart to stretch this canvas.
He invited me when I made the video with him. His apartment was his sanctuary. It was where he felt like he was himself, and it was every inch covered in piles of stuff. There's like piles of antiques, painting equipment, palettes. He was into junk art, or into junk as something to paint on.
It wasn't uncommon that he wouldn't know what day of the week it was because he would just paint until he was too tired to paint anymore.
He had like a quote, rack of paintings, and to me they were like film sets. They weren't really canvas. They weren't really like stretched. So he's pulling these things out, pulling them out, and pulling them out until he gets to the right one, and that's the painting he's working on.
I was looking through the archival photos this morning, and
Wow.
Have you seen this before?
No.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
There's the portraits. This is it being exhibited.
You have all the surprises.
So, these are
Oh my goodness.
Martin Wong's paintbrushes. Over the course of time, they developed these beautiful mini sculptures of paint. Come on, these things are alive. Look at them.
He was someone of incredible intensity physically. So the idea that he would die from AIDS was unthinkable. And he did it with such a sense of humor.
We as a community that cared about him, we all sort of lived that as best as we could. He was a beautiful, loving, caring, supportive friend.
Do you think there were ever plans to display this again?
No, I don't think so at all. At the moment that the decision was made to paint on the other side of the canvas, there was no focus on this side of the canvas as being important. These were logistical decisions that were completely unemotional, right? The painting was probably taking up too much space in the apartment. He was working on a new series of paintings. He just painted on the other side of the canvas. That was it.
Martin Wong was the master of reflecting things that he saw on the street with a depth of feeling. And the feeling is more sadness, I would say.
His work was an aspect of New York archival history because some of those buildings are gone. So it's like a portrait of the city that doesn't exist.
Houston Street is a major work. It evokes this haunting experience of standing on that street in the Lower East Side in the 80s and this world of material richness that suddenly emerges. Even if it's not totally intentional, the idea that you would look at the front of the painting, this blocked metal wall, and then the secret on the other side is this whole other universe.